Hello everyone, my name is Khalid Akilagman, and in this video I would like to present my project entitled Syllables and Epithesis. Project 2, Part 1, Syllables and Epithesis. In this video I will explain the topic syllables and epithesis. The presentation focuses on syllables and phonological process in English. These topics are important because pronunciation plays a key role in spoken communication. By understanding this concept, we can speak more clearly and naturally in English. Okay, what is syllable? Syllable is a unit of sound in a word that contains one vowel sound with or without consonant, and it can be understood as a beat. When a word is spoken, for example, the word cat has one syllable, table has two syllables, computer has three syllables, and education has four syllables. Syllables can be count by clapping each time a vowel sound is heard, or not by noticing how many times the chin drops while pronouncing a word. It is important to remember that one syllable is based on a vowel sound, not the number of vowel letters, which is why the word cake has only one syllable even though it contains two vowel letters. A syllable can be understood as a beat when a word is spoken. Every syllable must have one vowel sound, not one vowel letter. This is important because some words look long but actually have fewer syllables. Understanding syllables help us avoid incorrect pronunciation. Okay, for the examples of syllables. The slide shows words with different numbers of syllables. For example, one-syllable words are usually short and simple. Two- and three-syllable words are very common in daily conversation. Longer words usually contain more syllables and need careful pronunciation. Okay, the function. So, syllable helps speaker divide words into smaller sound units. They improve pronunciation clarity and fluency. Syllables also help listeners understand spoken language more easily. In language learning, syllables are very helpful for beginners. Okay, next slide is strong syllable and weak syllables. For example, strong syllables introduce, deuce, explanation. The syllables deuce and introduce contains a full vowel sound and carries the primary stress, making it a strong syllable. For weak syllables, example, photograph, p, explanation. The syllables p in photographs contain a reduced vowel sound, schwa, and it's unstressed, making a weak syllable. Strong syllables are stressed and pronounced clearly. Weak syllables are unstressed and often sounds softer in English. Weak syllables usually contain the schwa sound. This difference affects the rhythm and naturalness in speech. Okay, next question is what is epenthesis? Epenthesis is a phonological phenomenon where a sound is added to the middle of a word. This addition typically occurs to ease pronunciation, especially when there are consonant clusters that are difficult to articulate. Epenthesis is commonly observed in the child language, second language learning, and informal speech. For example, in some dialect, people might pronounce athlete as athlete, adding a vowel to separate the consonant cluster. This process helps break down the word into more manageable, pronounceable chunks. Epithesis is a phonological process where an extra sound is added to a word. The purpose of epenthesis is to make a pronunciation easier. This process usually occurs when speakers find certain sound difficult to pronounce. Epenthesis often appears in informal speech. Okay, the example epenthesis film is inserted to case the pronunciation of the consonant cluster. Grow is added to break up the consonant cluster. Idea, range, and warm. One example of epenthesis is a word film pronounced as film. The added vowel helps break a consonant cluster. Another example is adding a sound to make a pronunciation smoother. In our case, the meaning of the word stays the same. Okay, benefit of understanding epenthesis. Aids in understanding historical change in language, provide insight into how language adapt and evolve, helps in identifying regional dialect features, enhance understanding of non-standard speech patterns, facilitates comparative linguistic analysis. Understanding epenthesis help us understand how language change is. It also helps us to recognize different accent in the pronunciation patterns. This knowledge is useful in linguistic and language learning. Epenthesis show that language is flexible and dynamic. Function. Easiest transition between sounds, adapt loanwords into a language, create more phonetic harmony. Plus one is support the rhythmic patterns in speech. The function of epenthesis is to make speech easier and smoother. It helps speakers move from one sound to another. Epenthesis also help adapt words into a language. As a result, pronunciation becomes more natural. Okay, conclusion. In summary, epenthesis is a linguistic phenomenon that aids in the pronunciation by adding sounds to words. It is prevalent in the both first and second language acquisition, as noted by Yule in the study of language, and serves to simply and enhance fluency. In conclusion, epenthesis is a natural process in language that helps speakers pronounce words comfortably. Epenthesis does not change meaning, only pronunciation. This process shows how language adapts to speakers' needs. Okay, case study part 2. Okay, a case study, a busy morning at a Riverside Learning Center, analyzing and identifying the linguistic element. This case study presents real example of phonological process. It shows how theory works in real communication. Case studies are important because they connect concept to practice. They help us understand how language is used naturally. Okay, gonna assimilation. In the informal expression, gonna is derived from the phrase going to and represents a clear example of assimilation in English connected speech in careful pronunciation. Going to is articulated as going to, but in rapid or casual speech, the sounds influence one another and are reduced to gene. This change occurs because speakers tend to simply pronunciation when speaking quickly, especially in informal contexts. Assimilation happens when a sound becomes more similar to a neighboring sound to its articulation. In Gona, the nasal sound in going affect the following consonant, while the t sound in to weakness and less is clear, passive quality. As a result, price is pronounced more smoothly and efficiently. Therefore, Gona fits the category assimilation because its original sounds are altered. due to the influence of adjustment sound in connected speech. Assimilation happens when sounds influence each other. Example include the gonna, kinda, and wanna. These forms are common in informal speech. They help speakers communicate faster and more efficiently. The expression kinda originates from the phrase kind of and serves as example of assimilation in English. Phonetic when spoken carefully and slowly, the phrase pronounced as kind. However, in informal and rapid speech, speakers often reduce and blend the sound resulting in the pronunciation. This change reflects a natural tendency in spoken language to simply articulation or in order to maintain fluency and ease the communication. In phonological terms, assimilation occurs when adjacent sounds influence one another during speech. In the case of kinda, the vowel sound in of is omitted and the sound is kind becomes less distinct as it merged with the following unstressed vowel. This phonetic adjustment allows the phrase to be produced more smoothly and kind and efficiently. Consequently, kinda illustrates assimilation clearly as the surrounding sounds modify each other and create a more streamlined and natural pronunciation. Wanna assimilation. The term wanna comes from the phrase want to and represent another clear case of the assimilation in English. Pronunciation in careful and formal speech, the phrase is articulated as want to. However, when spoken quickly in casual conversation, the sounds are reduced and blended, resulting in the form want. This change demonstrates how sounds in connected speech influence one another, leading to a more natural and effortless pronunciation. From a phonological perspective, assimilation occurs when a sound changes to become more similar to a neighboring sound. In Wana, the alveolar stop t is influenced by the surrounding nasal, causing the t sound to weaken and eventually disappear. This implication reduces articulatory effort and allows the phrase to be spoken more smoothly. Therefore, Wana fits well within the Roach concept of assimilation as the sounds are modified by their phonetic improvement to produce the faster, more efficient spoken form. As metathesis. The pronunciation as instead of as is a well-known example of metathesis in English phonology. Metathesis refers to a process in which two sounds within a word switch position, a phenomenon discussed by the crystal in linguistic studies. In the standard pronunciation, as the consonant s comes before however, in the alternative form as, these two consonants appear in the opposite order, showing a clear rearrangement of sound rather than a change in meaning. This phonological variation does not involve the addition or removal of any sounds. Instead, it is the recording of existing segments. Such forms often arise due to the dialectical influence or patterns in language development. Because the internal sound structure of the word is altered through the transportation of s and ask fits perfectly within the definition of metathesis. As a result, it is classified as a case of metathesis, where sound position changes lead to a non-standard but systematic pronunciation. Assimilation happens when uh, okay. Next is Paschetti metathesis. The use of Paschetti instead of spaghetti is another clear illustration of metathesis in spoken English. Metathesis occurs when sound within a word are rearranged, a process commonly observed in informal speech and child language. The standard pronunciation of spaghetti will begin with the consonant cluster. which can be challenging for some speakers articulate smoothly, especially in rapid or developing speech. In the form spaghetti, the sound is moved to a later position in a word rather than being deleted or replaced. This recording this reordering makes the word easier to pronounce while still remaining recognizable to listener because the sound involves stays the same and only their position change. Pasquetti fits the linguistic definition of metathesis. The example demonstrates how speakers may adjust sound order to reduce articulatory difficulty without altering the word's overall identity. Metathesis is the change of sound position in a word. For example, X may become X. Another example is spaghetti become spaghetti. This process makes a pronunciation easier for some speakers. Film epitasis, the pronunciation film instead of film, can be explained as an example of epitasis in phonology. Epitasis refers to addition of a sound, usually a vowel, at the end of a word to make a pronunciation easier. In the standard from film, the final consonant cluster may be difficult for most speakers to articulate smoothly, especially in rapid or informal speech. To reduce this difficulty, an extra vowel sound such as E or A is added after the final consonant. Reducing the form film, this added vowel helps break up the consonant cluster and allows for a more fluent pronunciation. As no sound are removed or reordered, but rather an additional sound is attached at the end of the word. Film clearly fits the definition of epitasis. The example shows how speakers adapt pronunciation to improve ease and clarity in spoken language. Pasgetti epitasis. The pronunciation pasgetti rather than spaghetti can be analyzed as an example of epitasis. Epitasis occurs when additional sounds, most often a vowel, is inserted into a word to make a pronunciation easier. In the standard form spaghetti, the initial consonant cluster may be difficult for some speakers to produce smoothly, especially in child speech or informal contexts. To overcome this articulate difficulty, a vowel such as A is inserted between the consonant, resulting in the form pasquetti. This added vowels break up the consonant cluster and allows for clear and more fluent pronunciation. Because the change involves inserting an extra vowel rather than removing or rearranging sounds, pasquetti fits the linguistic definition of epitasis. This example illustrates how speakers naturally adapt sounds patterns to simple speech production. Animal epitasis. The pronunciation animal instead of animal can be described as an instance of epitasis in English phonology. Epitasis involves the addition of sound, most commonly a vowel, at or near the end of a word, make articulation easier. Is the standard pronunciation animal. The final unstressed vowel is realized as a schwa, which may be modified in some varieties of speech. In the from animal, this final vowel is produced as u, resulting as a slightly altered but more comfortable pronunciation for the speaker. Such vowel addition or modification are often included by dialectical patterns in or informal speech habits because the change includes the insertion of the extra vowel and sound rather than the removal or reordering of existing sound. Animal fits the definition of the epitasis. These examples show how speakers adjust vowel quality of achieve modern and more natural speech. Grandma epitasis. The pronunciation grandma rather than grandma can be interpreted as an example of epitasis in everyday speech. Epitasis involves adding a sound, typically a vowel, to make a word easier to pronounce. In the standard form grandma, the consonant sequence in YAM is relatively complex and may be difficult to articulate quickly, especially in a casual or rapid conversation. To reduce this articulatory difficult, Speakers may simply the cluster inserting a vowel grouping the D, resulting in the form grandma. This adjustment allows for smoother and faster pronunciation because the modification introduce an extra vowel sounds to ease articulation rather than changing the word. Meaning extra vowels or ease articulation meaning the grandma fits the definition of epithesis. This example highlights how speakers naturally modify sound structures to achieve more comfortable and efficient speech. Okay, and this is phonetic transcription. Okay, case study C. A language class on Friday afternoon. Analyzing and identifying the stress perceiving, attracting, and shifting suffixes. Careless, stress, and perceiving suffixes. The word careless is an example of a stress perceiving suffix because the primary stress remains on the same syllable as in the West word. In the word care, the stress naturally falls into the only syllables. And when the suffix less is added to the form careless, the stress does not move. This happens because the suffix less is stress neutral and does not attract the shift stress, allowing the original stress pattern and the base of word to stay and change. These suffixes do not change the stress of original word. Example include less, full, and ness. The stress remains of the same syllable. This helps maintain consistent pronunciation. Hopeful stress preserving suffixes. Stress preserving suffixes. The word hopeful is an example of a stress preserving suffix because the addition of the suffix full does not change the original stress pattern of the base word. In the base word hope, the stress falls in on its only syllable, and when full is added to form hopeful, the primary stress remains on the same syllable. This shows that suffix full is stress neutral, as it does not attract or not shift stress, but simply attach to the base word while keeping the original stress intact. Darkness stress preserving suffixes. The word darkness is another example of a stress preserving suffix because the suffix ness does not affect the original stress pattern of the base word. In the base word dark, the primary stress falls into only syllables, and when ness is added from the darkness, the stress remains of the same syllable. This shows that the suffix ness is stressed neutral, as the simply form as a noun without the attracting or shifting stress, allowing the original stress placement to stay unchanged. Education stress attracting suffixes. The word education is an example of stress and attracting suffix because the suffix Asian causes a shift in the position of primary stress. In the base word educate, the main stress falls into earlier syllable. But when Asian is added to the form education, the primary stress is moves to the syllable immediately before the suffix. This shows that Asian is a stress attracting as they introduce a new stress pattern rather than preserving the stress of the base word, resulting in a predictable location of stress, the deified form. Musician stress attracting suffixes. The word musician is an example of a stress attracting suffix because the addition of suffix ian causes a shift in the position of primary stress. In the base word music, the main stress falls on first syllable, but when ian is added for musician, the primary stress moves the syllable immediately before the suffix. This demonstrates that ion attract stress and alters the original stress pattern of the base word, resulting in a predictable stress shift toward the suffix. Geology stress attracting suffixes. The word geology is an example of stress attracting suffix because the suffix logy influence the placement of primary stress in the base from geo. The stress pattern is not firmly fixed, but when logy is added to from geology, the main stress shifts to this syllable immediately before the suffix. This shows the logy is a stress attracting as it determines the stress pattern the derived word rather than perceiving the stress of the base form. Democratic stress shifting suffixes. The word democratic is an example of stress shifting because the addition of the suffix ic changed the original stress pattern of the base word. In the base word democrat, the primary stress falls on earlier syllable, but when ic is added to from democratic, the stress shifts to a different syllable. Near the end of the word, this shows that the suffix actually do not preserve or merely attract stress, but instead causes a recognition of the stress pattern, making democratic a clear example of stress shifting suffixation. Economic stress shifting suffixes. The word economic is an example of stress shifting suffix because the addition of the suffix is the original stress pattern of the base word. In the base word economy, the primary stress falls into the earlier syllable, but when ic is attached to from economic, the stress shifts to the syllable immediately before the suffix. This demonstrates that ic causes the recognition of stress rather than perceiving it making economic a clear example of stress shifting and suffixation. Photographic stress shifting suffixes. The word photographic is a clear example of stress shifting suffix because the addition the suffix actually changes the overall stress pattern of the word. In the base word photograph, the primary stress falls into the first syllable, and it is shifts in the photography. But when ic is added to from photographic, the stress moves the syllable immediately before the suffix. This shows that the suffix ic does not simply attract stress but recognize the stress pattern of the entire word, making photographic a strong example of stress shifting suffixation. Communication stress shifting suffixes. The word communication is an example of stress shifting suffix because the addition of the suffix Asian changed the original stress pattern of the base word. In the base from communicate, the primary stress occurs on a earlier syllable, but when Asian is added to from communication, the stress shifts to be a syllable and immediately before the suffix. This shows that Asian triggers a recognition of stress to maintain mimetic structure, making a communication a clear case of stress shifting suffixation. Stress shifting suffixes change the overall stress pattern. Suffixes like AC cause stress to move. The result is different pronunciation rhythm. Shifting important in English phonology. Okay, thank you for watching this video presentation. I hope this explanation helps you to understand syllables and phonological process. And thank you for your attention.